Okay, so when we talk about ionic compounds dissolving in water, most ionic compounds are soluble in water. Okay, so when we talk about an ionic compound, we're dissolving it in water. There are two things that happens in the process of dissolving. Okay, so one of them is dissociation. Now, what that means is that the ions are being pulled apart. So ionic compounds are essentially a crystal lattice structure. Right? So imagine this is like a block, a cube of crystal lattice. So here, the positive and negative ions are being held together in their solid cubes with electrostatic attraction, right? So that means the positive ions and the negative ions are attracting. So what happens is when water becomes in contact with these electrostatic attraction forces, the water molecules actually will pull apart these ions. And the reason why is because the slightly negative side of the molecule, which is the oxygen, will become attracted to the positive ions. The slightly positive portion of the molecule, which is the hydrogens, will become attracted to the negative charges. So what ends up happening is opposites attract, and that's exactly what happens. The second process that happens is called hydration. This is when the ions are separated. What happens is the water molecules basically surround the different ions. Actually, this next picture will show you very nicely what's happening. So here's a process of dissolving. Okay, so this is using sodium chloride as our example. So in the dissolving process, right here is our crystal lattice. So this is our solid sodium chloride. So we have our positive sodium ions and our negative chlorine ions. So if you take a look at when the little waters begin to contact your crystal lattice, the little negative oxygens are attracted to the positive charge, and the positive hydrogens, if you notice the way the water is turned, like the molecule is twisted here, the positive side is attracted to the negative chlorine. So what ends up happening is these ions basically get attracted to water and will move out. All of these ions will essentially pull away from each other. This is the process known as dissociation. After the fact, so what happens once that ion is separated? The ion becomes surrounded by water molecules. And notice, the little positive hydrogens are all surrounding my chlorine, and the negative oxygens are surrounding the sodium. This is the process of hydration. So dissociation is the pulling apart of the ions themselves. Hydration is once they are apart, the fact that the waters are keeping them apart from each other due to the attractive forces. Okay, so here we're going to look at dissociation equations. So when we talk about this dissociation process, there's actually a way that we can write this out. Now, this is not a chemical reaction, okay? We are not making something new. The only thing that's happening here is the ionic compound is breaking up into its ions. So here we have sodium chloride, and then after it's broken up, the ions are separated. We have sodium ions and we have chlorine ions. So we're not making anything new. It's just that here they're together and here they are apart. So when we write out a dissociation equation, so I know it's called a dissociation reaction, but the term dissociation just simply means ionization. So like the ions are being produced. On the left side is always the solid ionic compound, okay? And on the right-hand side is always the ions that are produced. So check out the states. Ionic compounds are solid at room temperature. So when they're in that crystal lattice shape, they are solid. On the right-hand side, they are now showing that they have an AQ symbol. Think of it as the left side is before you dissolve it. The right-hand side is after it's dissolved. So now we have them being AQ, and the charge is in the top right-hand corner. Let's look at another example. So the dissociation of sodium sulfate. So we start off by writing out the ionic compound formula for sodium sulfate. So what's being produced here? Sodium ions and sulfate ions. Oops. And sulfate ions. Okay, and of course, make sure that you balance this. So we have 2 sodium ions that are being produced here. So the left side, again, is always the solid ionic compound. The right-hand side are our ions that are produced as the effect after dissolving.